Welcome to Candidates Night, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Nassau County. My name is Judy Jacobson, and I have served as the Voter Service Chairperson for the Nassau County League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to two major goals: providing the public with unbiased information about candidates and issues so that voters can make informed decisions, and increasing voter participation. Please join us to help accomplish our goals. There's membership information on the table at the entrance. Please take some as you leave. Thank you. And a sincere thank you to Molloy College for providing, this outstanding facility. Thanks as well to Angelo Fraboni, Artistic Director of the Madison Theater, for making this event possible. Tonight, we have two candidates competing for the Democratic Party's nomination for County Executive. Laura Curran and George Maragos. All right. Thank you. All right, if we don't get moving, we won't get to questions. Seek your vote in the upcoming primary election on September 12th. Lisa Scott will be our moderator. Lisa is president of the Suffolk County League and has no stake in this election. Our timekeeper is Dorothy Callahan Harris, also from Suffolk County. I will now read the procedures for the evening and then turn the meeting over to Lisa Scott. The moderator will be a member of the League of Women Voters who lives outside of the elected office district. Candidates will draw lots to determine the order of speaking. Cards will be distributed by volunteers from the League of Women Voters and students from the college. Cards will be collected and vetted by League members to ensure that they are legible and not repetitive or abusive. Questions must be confined to the issues in the campaign. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement. After all the candidates have spoken, the moderator will read questions. No questions may be addressed to an individual candidate. Candidates will be given 1 minute to answer every question. Now, each candidate will be given a red card that may be used if he or she wishes to rebut a response. When making a rebuttal, the candidate will hold up a red card to be recognized by the moderator. The candidate may use his or her rebuttal card a total of 3 times. Each candidate will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. A League member will act as timekeeper. The timekeeper will hold up a sign indicating when 30 seconds remain. Where is our timekeeper? Okay, could you show the sign to them? No, 30 seconds we only use. Right, and then stop. Okay, we don't use the 2 minutes. The timekeeper will hold up a sign indicating when 30 seconds remain and again when time is up. When the time is up, the speaker will be allowed to finish the sentence. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement and will speak in reverse order from the opening statement. Since the purpose of this meeting is to determine the candidates' views, no substitute speakers will be allowed. We don't have to worry about that. The use of props, charts, or visuals, and the distribution of campaign literature is prohibited. Now, I'm going to read our video recording policy. The content of this forum is owned by the League of Women Voters. Only the videographer authorized by the League may record this forum, and that is PATV. Any use of the authorized recording requires the advance approval of the League of Women Voters, except other local leagues may post the recordings on their websites. Only licensed media, including TV, radio, and newspapers, are entitled by FCC regulations to air portions of this recording. Anyone else who airs this recording must do so only in its entirety. No one is permitted to edit footage for campaign purposes. The League of Women Voters will post recordings of Meet the Candidates Night in their entirety on League Media. And both candidates have signed and agreed to the rules, and now it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Laura, let's do the pledge of allegiance.
Okay, would you all rise for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out this evening. It's always an honor to be here in Nassau County, where I actually grew up. And I look forward to hearing the issues and the views of the candidates. A few quick housekeeping details. Number one, if you have a cell phone with you, would you make sure it's either off or completely on silent mode? If we're interrupted by a cell phone ringing, I will stop. So please check. If you're expecting an important call, do not sit in the front. Sit in the back so you can step out. Also, we have cards, as you know, question cards. I've already gotten probably about 25 or 30, and part of what I have to do is figure out which ones are going. And I took a quick look. You have asked excellent, detailed questions, and I really appreciate that. And I think the candidates will too, because it'll give them a chance to speak to the issues. Since each candidate has a red card, occasionally there will be something that a candidate feels they'd like to add to their opponent's response. They will indicate, as Judy said, and we'll tick off 3 chances at that. They will also have their 2-minute closing statement to reiterate what they want to make as their selling points to you. So we're not starting by saying to them, why should you be the Democratic candidate? They're going to tell us this in their opening statements. Please also, after each candidate's opening statement, feel free to applaud. If, however, we're interrupted by any kind of applause during the candidate's statements, or even as they complete their answer to a question, again, I will stop. It's not the right thing to do if we're trying to cover a lot of topics. Applause is at the beginning and end. And again, this is a civil conversation, and the League's goal is for the voter to be educated. And the more we can ask detailed questions of interest to the community, the more educated you will be, and in the next 6 days or so, communicate that to your friends and neighbors. So at this point, who won the lot? Who goes
We didn't do it
first?
yet.
You didn't do it.
All right.
Okay, Ms. Curran, if you would start. And then at the end, we'll do the same order, so Mr. Maragos would go last. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so yours, 2 minutes.
All right. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this and Malloy College for hosting us in this beautiful auditorium. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out on a Thursday night, probably one of the last nice nights we're going to have, for taking time to come and get to know your candidates. I am not a career politician. I have a background as a newspaper reporter and got into public service when I ran for my local school board. I live not too far down the road, down in Baldwin. I've got kids in the public schools. And I wanted to do what I could to help my community and our schools succeed. And I found I loved it. I love dealing with the policy, I love dealing with the budget, and it really sparked my interest to step up and serve my community in a bigger way. So I had the opportunity to run for legislator. And in my 3.5 years as a legislator, representing Baldwin, Freeport, a little bit of Rockville Center, some of the other surrounding areas, I'm very proud of the reputation that I've carved out as someone who puts her constituents first. I see this job as being a public servant. I'm here to serve the public. But I don't want to sugarcoat it. For the past 3.5 years, I've had a front row seat to the corruption and to the patronage and to the mismanagement that has really become an embarrassment. And I think about who lives in this county. We've got smart people, hardworking people. We've got a lot going for us. But we just don't have a government that lives up to us. And as I'm campaigning all over the county, there's a common denominator that I hear wherever I go, and that is a feeling of deep distrust. And it's no wonder. You pick up the newspaper, you turn on the local news, and you see an endless stream of convictions on corruption charges. And the list seems endless. It's the current county executive Mangano, Ippolito, Skelos, who used to be the senator here. I know we can do better. I'm in this race because when I'm county executive, I will make sure we have safeguards in place to stop corruption before it starts, to make sure that every penny of taxpayer money is spent appropriately, and that we finally can create a vision of how we do real economic development and live up to our potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maragos?
Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank the Women League of Voters for hosting this debate tonight. I want to take a second to pray for the victims of Hurricane Harvey and those in Florida that are possibly confronting an even greater disaster from Hurricane Irma. My name is George Maragos, and I've been your Nassau County Controller for the past 8 years, twice elected. I believe that I have served honorably and with distinction throughout my 8 years. When we took over the county, when I became Nassau County Controller, the county was almost bankrupt, having a $250 million structural deficit. Our cash balance was depleted to less than $10 million, and our long-term debt was skyrocketing. Plus, there was a 3.9% property tax increase that had been enacted every year for the distant future. 8 years later, the county is in a stronger financial position. Our debt has actually been reduced by $100 million. Those 3.9% property tax increases every year were terminated. Our cash reserves have grown from $10 million to $170 million. Yes, we do have challenges ahead of us, but the county is in a much stronger position without property tax increases that would have increased property taxes for every homeowner in this room and in this county by 30%. They would have been 30% higher today than if I had not become controller 8 years ago. We have serious challenges going forward. We have our expenses are growing faster. They're not revenues. Corruption is a big issue. But corruption has happened on both sides of the aisle. And the person who stood up to corruption by not approving almost $300 million worth of contracts in the first year alone was this controller standing in front of you. And that is why we have made substantial fiscal progress in the county, and we've kept property taxes down. So I'm proud of the accomplishments, and I believe I'm the best qualified person to move ahead and put this county on the right fiscal road to fix the many challenges that are facing us in affordable housing, in high property taxes, and in our public transit system. Thank you.
A little more emotion, one more time. Okay, thank you. A word of caution to the candidates. We are going to be strict about the response time, so please, a phrase finishing your thought, but not 3 sentences, okay? And so we'll start. The first question will go to Mr. Marigus, and then Ms. Curran, and then we'll flip back and forth. And again, lots and lots of questions. So, Nassau County has been polarized for ages. If elected, how will you bring elected officials together to work for the greater good? 1 minute.
Sure. Before I was elected controller, I was in private industry for over 35 years. I rose to some of the highest levels in corporate America and started my own successful company that still exists. My sons have taken it over and they're doing better than I did. You don't achieve success unless you're able to bring people together, to work together to achieve common goals. And I think my experience, both especially in private industry, but also in government, has been about bringing people together to achieve goals. And you are absolutely right. Our politics are very polarized. People don't communicate. They don't get behind closed doors, and compromise. I believe I have the experience to articulate goals and bring people together to work together to achieve common goals for the best interest of our communities.
Thank you. Ms. Kern? Excuse me. All right, we'll use this as a demonstration. Please do not applaud during the question and answer part, which is the bulk of the evening, okay? Because it interrupts their train of thought, and we really want to have some thoughtful answers. Thank you. Ms. Kern, would you start?
Yes, that's an excellent question. The first thing I thought of when I heard this question was the hub, the Coliseum. And really, it was partisan bickering that escorted the islanders off the island. And we have a situation now where we've got a redone Coliseum in 77 acres of parking lot. And every time I drive by, I think of all of the tax generation that could have happened there, all of the economic development that could have happened there had it not been for partisan bickering. This is a wonderful opportunity that we can work across municipal lines to do real economic development, to create a range of housing options, to make it a real destination, and not for nothing, grow the tax base, which we desperately need. The person who is the county executive needs to have a vision for how we grow, and the diplomatic skills to be able to work across party lines and across municipal lines. And I have to say, under this current administration, the Mangano and Maragos administration, there has been a real lack of a vision of how we grow. It seems that we're just sort of getting through the day to keep the lights on, but we're not looking really holistically of how we work with the other entities, because we are a community of communities. We need real diplomacy to make it happen.
Okay, thank you. The next question we take to Ms. Curran first. In what way do you plan to address the needs of our homeless veterans and improve the services in place for veterans now?
Another excellent question. Our veterans are often underappreciated. We have many coming back from overseas, men and women who fought. They face homelessness, they face drug abuse, they face unemployment. One thing that I'm proud that I've been able to do as a county legislator is make it a little bit easier for some of those returning vets to get jobs. I helped spearhead legislation that made it easier for disabled veteran businesses owned by disabled veterans to do business with the county. Because the data shows that veterans tend to hire other veterans. Veterans are actually very good workers as well. They can work well in a crisis. They've got great discipline. So I'm very proud that this is a law that we have now on the books, and we're compiling a database of veteran-owned businesses. Also, the homeless issue is a very big issue. And if you ride the LIRR along the Babylon line in Baldwin, Freeport, Rockville Center, you're going to see a lot of homeless people. On the county, we can do a better job of doing outreach and getting services to those veterans, those homeless veterans who need our help.
Thank you. Mr. Marigus?
The most important characteristic of a leader of the next county executive is going to be integrity and honesty. And when you hear my opponent here talk about that I was part of the Mangano administration, when she knows very well that the controller is independently elected by the people and is actually the watchdog on the administration and the legislature. So she is misleading you, and that's not a good start for the next county executive to have no integrity. Secondly, when the homeless issue was brought up with regards to the veterans, and the county executive said that we don't have a veterans homeless problem. That has been ended. And not a single legislator, including my opponent, stood up and said that is not true. She's telling you tonight, but when the issue was presented to the public, she did not stand up and say that that is not true, Mr. County Executive. We do have a serious veterans homeless problem, and this is what we need to do to address it. And I stood up and said that is not true.
Thank you. Red card.
Thank you.
30 seconds.
So my opponent claims that it's not an administration, it's not the Mangano-Maragos administration, but I'll just remind you, 4 years ago when he was running to keep his seat as controller, he ran a TV ad standing with him right next to Ed Mangano, and it was the Mangano-Maragos team, very proudly. So I think it's a little disingenuous to say that this was not a team effort.
Okay, thank you. As is my privilege, I'll elaborate on a question and go back to the question on homeless veterans. And I'll ask each of you to please give one concrete proposal that you might suggest were you to win the election in November. So, Mr. Maragos, this is yours first.
Well, I think that first you're going to hear the recurring theme where, none of her facts are correct. So she thinks that if we're standing side by side here, that we're not opponents. We are opponents even though we're standing side by side, and there's nothing wrong with, working with the county executive. That is my job, was my job, but also calling out the county executive when we exceed borrowing rules, when we have veterans homeless issues, which are declared not to be true. That is my job as the controller, and we talked about working together, and that's about working together, and I've worked together proudly with the legislature as well with both sides. But with regards to the homeless problem, of course, the first step is to recognize and admit that we have a problem. The county has, and I as controller pointed this out, we have a lot of real estate throughout Nassau County that we own that is sitting idle, that the county is not using, that we should be deploying and converting to affordable housing for our veterans and also other low-income and mid-income families.
Thank you. Ms. Curran, same question.
So concrete things we can do. We do have some people on our staff who do homeless outreach, and they actually do a fantastic job. The problem is many of the homeless people have they're mentally ill, they're addicted to drugs, and it's not against the law to be homeless. You can't make them take services if they don't want them. We can do a better job with our Department of Social Services, making these services available to people, doing more outreach, and I think we can also do a better job of making sure that we fully fund and staff them. We've got to work well also with our Veterans Administration. I think DSS, Department of Social Services, and the Veterans Administration can work better together to make sure that people get the services that they need.
Thank you. And once again on that subject, as the last follow-up, and Ms. Curran, you first, could you discuss the financial implications of doing something for housing for veterans? Same question to both of you.
Actually, what we need, and not just for veterans, for everybody, we need a broad range of affordable housing, of housing options for veterans, for young people. Not everybody wants or belongs in a single-family house. I think at the county level, we don't control the zoning. It's the zoning municipalities. It's the towns and the villages that do. So we need to create a vision from the top, creating an environment that makes it more welcoming for this kind of development in the communities that want it. That will help our homeless problem. It will also help keep young people and grow the tax base. It's good. It's the right thing to do, and also it's good for our economy. I would also add that we've got to do a better job, as I said before, doing outreach and making sure that people know that there are services and there is access to services. And the investment in that will pay off in the long run in terms of economic development. If you have a veteran who comes home and gets the services he or she needs to be confident and self-reliant, that veteran will get a job, perhaps become an employer himself, and that will be better for all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Maragos?
There is a difference between theory and experience. And what you're hearing from my opponent is, a vision and we need to do better. But we have homeless people that are sleeping on the street, on the trains right now. They don't need a vision. They need a place to live, a place to sleep, and a plate to eat. And we need to be able, and the county executive, the next county executive, need to differentiate between immediate needs and long-term visions. And I just said that we have vacant real estate that we should be converting, and there's federal and state grants that we're not taking advantage of to take care of our homeless, to take care of our homeless veterans, especially. And that's the knowledge and experience that I bring to the table after 35 years in private industry, and the theory that you hear, and we need to do better. We all can dream and stand back and dream that we can do better. But that is the difference between experience, accomplishment, and ability to make life better and more affordable for our residents.
Thank you. Another major problem in Nassau County is the opioid crisis. What would be your plans to address this in a better way if elected? Mr. Maragos?
I don't think we're doing a good enough job. And, in the legislature, again, and my opponent never raised an issue. And all of a sudden, last year, the county executive, standing with the police commissioner, told us that we had a crisis. Well, how did the crisis arise? And nobody knew about it. Now we're presented with a very serious problem. And again, the legislature, including my opponent, didn't ask a single question, did not ask for a public forum or public hearings to delve into the issue. And I said publicly, that this should not have happened. We have a police department that is not representative of the communities. It's underrepresented by the minorities where the crime, the opium epidemic has taken hold, and we do not have effective community policing to deal with. Secondly, we're not doing enough to provide counselors to schools and in areas that need counseling to keep kids and provide programs, youth programs for children so that they do not succumb to the epidemic.
Thank you. Mr. Maragos, the next question. NYFA has proposed
Do you want me to answer the opioid?
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to answer the opioid?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I told you I make mistakes. My apologies. Go ahead.
Not to worry, not to worry. My opponent is incorrect. I have had public forums about the opioid crisis. I was happy to host the police department in 3 of the communities that I represent to talk to families, to look for the warning signs. It was a detective from the police department who gave a wonderful presentation, and my constituents found it incredibly helpful. The opioid crisis, I think we need to attack it from 3 fronts. It's a mushrooming problem. It's affecting our economy. It's affecting our families. It's really tearing families apart. It's heartbreaking if you know anyone who's been through it, and I've seen it. First, prevention. We've got a wonderful program. It's in some schools, not in all schools. It's just one example of the way we can do prevention in a smart way. It's called Too Good for Drugs, and it talks to kids. It's a curriculum for children as young as 4th and 5th grade to have them make the good choices, to not succumb to peer pressure. And it's proven over and over that $1 spent on prevention equals $7 not spent on incarceration, public safety costs, et cetera, down the road. 2, treatment. There is a treatment gap. So I'm sure you've all heard of Narcan, where if you're having an overdose, you get administered Narcan, you come back automatically. You go to emergency room, have Narcan, and then you're out without the proper treatment. And the 3rd is enforcement. I know my time is up. We get to that one at the next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Curran, this question is for you
Yes.
then. Okay. NYFA has proposed draconian cuts to the Nassau County budget. One of the proposed cuts is to eliminate the Nassau County Youth Board. As county executive, where would you stand on this issue?
As a legislator, every year, I have been so frustrated to see that our youth programs that we fund through the county are on the chopping block. They're used as a bargaining chip for the budget. It's completely the wrong thing to do. These programs provide homework help, drug abuse help, help to prevent gangs, for runaways, you name it. Big problems, little problems are addressed by these programs. If we can't ensure on the county level that children can grow up to be safe and strong and confident, we're losing a generation of children. I'm very proud to have fought to keep the programs. We've been successful in that fight. And as county executive, I will make sure that we have a recurring revenue stream to keep those programs, to keep our young people safe. And again, it's not only the right thing to do, it's good for our families, it's good for our communities, it's good for our economy, and it's a priority for me. Not for nothing, it will save money down the road as well.
Thank you. Mr. Maragos?
Well, I call the NIFA report, unprofessional and a completely waste of money. There wasn't a single proposal in there that had merit. And I wrote to NIFA as well and expressed my views, and I expressed them publicly. Nobody else did. Some people followed afterwards. And actually, back in 2012, we had, my office had highlighted, and we had done an analysis, that every dollar spent on youth board programs saves $6. When they first wanted, the legislature had voted to cut the youth programs. And it was on my initiative that those programs were restored. But the NIFA report, they want draconian cuts, on programs where it's going to cost the county more. And some of the sacred cows that represent millions of dollars of expenditures that are completely waste, nobody wants to talk about except this controller, such as we have police officers that are nearing retirement, that sit behind a desk, that are earning over $200,000 a year in overtime, or the broken property tax assessment system that we have that is costing the county over $80 million a year. Thank you.
And both of those are subjects we will be going into as well. Mr. Maragos, along the same lines, how are we ever going to pay off the county debt without cutting services to dangerously low levels and not raise taxes, which are among the highest in the nation?
Well, the county debt, believe it or not, as I've indicated, has been reduced by about $100 million, over actually $100 million, and it stands currently at $3.5 billion. I know it's a lot of money, but when the county budget is $3 billion, that's about 1.2 times our annual revenue. Most families can go to the bank and borrow money to buy a home at 3 times their annual family income. So our debt is not the issue. It's very manageable. It has been managed well, and it has been reduced. Some of our other costs, such as police overtime costs, our broken or rigged property tax assessment system that has shifted the property tax burden from the high-end homes to the middle and lower-income homes, that is costing, and it's costing the county an additional $80 million a year, are the real issues that we should be talking about.
Ms. Curran?
So it's very important to get our financial house in order. My opponent had said earlier that the county is in stronger financial position than it's been, and I would have to disagree with that, proven by the fact that we are not only under NIFA control, we are under a control period of NIFA, which means we have very little say over our budget. That happened under the Mangano-Maragos administration. NIFA was not in a control period before that. We've got to get our budget in order. We've got to go line by line through the budget, make sure every penny is being spent appropriately. Right now, this administration is spending millions and millions of dollars on outside contracts to connected legal firms and other people who do work for the county. We can bring a lot of that work in-house and save millions every year. We pay a corruption tax every year for those bloated patronage positions, for those bloated contracts. Guess who pays for it? We do. We're going to cut the corruption tax when I'm county executive and make sure that our spending is under control. We also have to look at the other side. We have to look at revenue, and we have to be serious about economic development. We're not living up to our potential. We're not keeping our young people, and our tax base is eroding. Assessment also must be corrected so that everybody pays their fair share, which is not the case under this administration.
Thank you.
Can I answer that question, I think?
We keep doing this. You did.
Again, I reiterate that,
You did.
I did?
You did.
Okay.
You did. Unless you want to use your red card and respond. 30 seconds if
Yes,
you do.
okay, I will. Very, very quickly, again, integrity and knowing the facts is critically important, and again, you're being misled. My opponent never went through, in the 4 years almost that she's been a legislature, never went through the budget line by line to suggest cuts. Our annual financial statements are audited. I don't think she ever inquired about them. So to make statements that are disingenuous is not appropriate for an aspiring next county executive.
Thank you. You both referred to the police and the large part of the budget that says, this question now would go to Ms. Curran first. What can you do if you're county executive with that much of the budget going to a police contract?
Yes, of your property tax, of that part of the tax bill, your property tax bill, 87% goes to police. Also, there's the sales tax as well, so that funds a lot of the rest of the budget. Our police costs are very high. It's going to be up to the next county executive to negotiate the police unions. In fact, all the municipal unions. All of the municipal contracts are up at the end of this year, and I think it's very unlikely that this administration will be negotiating them. We have to make sure that we negotiate fairly. We have to make sure that our people remain safe. But I think we're going to have some serious conversations. Again, it's going to take a lot of diplomacy. I will disagree again with my opponent who says that I haven't gone line by line and I haven't found savings. I'm very proud of the fact that I carved out a plan, a bipartisan plan, to restore routes to the buses that were cut. I did that by going through the budget and finding money, and did it successfully. I'm very proud of that. A lot of people in the district that I live, that I represent, down on the South Shore, use the bus. To me, I know this is not the question, but that's a huge priority for me.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Marigas.
Again, I guess it's a question of misleading the taxpayers. I want to remind my opponent that last October she voted for a budget. She voted for a budget that actually cut bus routes, and that's a matter of public record. Secondly, let's not talk about hypotheticals, in future. I've already mentioned that, that we have police officers that are earning over $200,000 in overtime. They're abusing the system. We have archaic rules that are not even written in our contracts with regards to minimum manning, that we cannot utilize our police officers effectively to be diverted where we have the greatest need, and we're fighting the opiate issues or gun violence, or we have high crimes. Those are contractual rules that are called minimum manning, that are not even contractual, but we allow them to happen, and we don't negotiate them out. That's where the most of the money in the police department. It's not the salaries of the police officers. It's the waste and mismanagement that is allowed to persist, and it requires somebody with experience and knowledge and insight to be able to fairly tackle those issues.
Thank you. Mr. Maragos, a question from the audience. As a disabled rider and a student at Hofstra University, I'd like to know what your plans are to ensure that transportation is improved and not further destroyed.
Well, that has been one of my main campaign pledges, that we need to invest in our public transportation system, both in our bus system, introduce new technologies and new concepts such as public ride-sharing services, maybe even extend the monorail system out to Long Island, and invest also in improving the Long Island Railroad. Public transportation is the lifeblood of our Long Island economy, and we've let it degrade for too long, and now without any investment. I mean, I've posted some seats that were sent by residents the seats on the Long Island Railroad are patched, are taped. It's a third world railroad system, and it needs a complete overhaul. And as a county executive, I've committed to do that, to work with state and federal agents to bring the funds, plus our own money that I will extract from county savings in having a more efficient government, so that we can invest in our infrastructure as well as building a new economy that will generate high-paying jobs.
Thank you. Ms. Kern?
Public transportation is a passion of mine. Young people aren't driving as much as people my age, I hate to admit it. I was a strong advocate for allowing ride sharing to happen legally here in Nassau County. If we're talking about keeping our young people, they use ride sharing. Public transportation is key. I was an unapologetic supporter of the third track because it's an investment in our infrastructure to help make it easier for people to get on and off the island, to get around the island. We've got to do that if we want to grow. I'm passionate about the buses and finding recurring revenue to fund the buses. And also there are models in the rest of the country that we could be copying. More flexible ways of doing the routes, smaller buses, doing it on demand with your phone. That's what other places are doing. I think we have a real opportunity to lead the way here and do that here.
Thank you. Follow up on that question, Ms. Curran, you first. How would you, as county executive, get input from people who presently take public transit? And also, how would you convince hundreds of thousands of people to consider public
Oh,
transportation?
such a great question. My dream would be to have people ride the bus by choice, not because they don't have a car. I did an experiment. I did 5 days where I'm lucky enough to have a car, but I did 5 days where I took the bus, I took my bike, and I talked to people. And that's the best input you can get. You find out what's working, you find out what's not working, you find out what the frustrations are, and then you can tailor the bus to actually work better for the people. I also would have to just point out an inaccuracy in what my opponent said, that I voted to cut funding. That is actually not true. I voted against that budget. It's a budget that also raised fees, and I would do it again. I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to restore some of those routes. Unfortunately, this administration has not made public transportation a priority. They've cut bus routes again, and as county executive, I will find recurring sources of revenue. For instance, this year, we had $12 million surplus in the red light camera fees. Let's use some of that to restore the buses. There are also two grants, two pieces of bonding that we did that equaled $3 million that we could use towards the buses. That was never done. It's something I suggested to the administration, and they didn't do it. I would do that as county executive.
Thank you. Mr. Marigas?
You know, you don't listen to the people by riding your bike, okay? You go and ride the trains, you ride the buses, and you take a poll, to listen to as many people to get a scientifically sense of what is happening. And I'm proud, about a month ago, we released a poll of the Long Island Railroad that showed that 65% of our residents are dissatisfied with the level of service that the LIR provides. 6 months earlier, the Long Island Railroad administration was telling us that the satisfaction was 84%. A lie, and everybody knew it was laughable. But, we went out, which is the appropriate scientific way to talk to people, through surveys to find out what the real customer service satisfaction is. And at that basis, then you can bring public policy to bear and public funding to ensure that we upgrade our transportation system. So there's a wrong way and a correct way to approach problems and bring solutions to bear.
Thank you. Further on transportation income, Mr. Marigas, income from red light cameras was supposed to fund youth programs until the administration changed it. Would you take steps, be specific, to return the income to its original intent?
Well, as I indicated, I was back in 2012 when they first proposed and actually enacted cutting all the youth board programs. We did a study that showed that the long-term cost to the county would be greater than the investment in maintaining the youth programs, and as a result, those youth programs were restored. As I indicated, and I had pointed this to my opponent as well and to the legislature publicly, that we were sitting on $170 million in a cash balance, and they were telling the public that they could not find $6.5 million to restore, not to cut the bus routes. And where they were proposing to cut the bus routes were mostly in minority communities that had the greatest need for public transportation. And they were arguing, including my opponent, that they could not find, they didn't have the money. And then my opponent says that magically she found a pot of money when they were sitting and the county controller was telling them that we had $170 million in the bank that they could have used to fund public transportation, and they elected not to, but they continue to mislead the public.
Thank you. Ms. Curran?
So the questioner who asked is exactly right. The red light cameras were sold basically to the population as the way we got buy-in. This was the previous administration. The way they got buy-in for the red light cameras was that it would fund the youth programs. Under this administration, that was revoked. Now it goes into the general fund. So the youth programs are now always on the chopping block. They're vulnerable every single year, and they're subject to debate. And as a Democrat and as somebody who sits on the legislature, This has always been a priority, to make sure that we keep them on, and we've been able to successfully keep the programs. But it shouldn't be a fight every single year. We shouldn't have to beg, and the people who run these programs shouldn't have to beg to provide the services for kids. They're doing it for us. They're doing it for all of us. We've got to make sure that we've got recurring revenue for the youth programs, for the buses, for the things that we always find on the chopping block. And these are the things that affect the most vulnerable among us. We can do so much better.
Thank you. We have a few questions about traffic. So Ms. Curran, the first one, where do you stand on congestion pricing, and is it even viable in Nassau County?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I know that's something they're talking about a little to the west of us. Congestion pricing might be a hard sell, which is why it makes me even more passionate about expanding the options of getting around besides using your car. Making sure that we have enough funding for the buses, making sure that we fight for our fair share of public transportation funding for the railroad. And I'm very happy that now the third track is coming. That's a good investment. The Ronkonkoma line is coming. That's a good investment. That will get more people off the roads. It's better for our environment. Also, the other thing we can do is create more walkable downtowns. Here in Nassau, Farmingdale, wide range of housing options, new apartment complex. People walk around there now. They don't drive as much. The great example in Suffolk is Patchogue, a wonderful walkable downtown. People live where they work. It works. And it's also great for the environment, great for traffic.
Thank you. Mr. Marigus, congestion pricing?
We definitely don't need another tax on our residents, because that's what it is. We're kind of talking and fed up with raising traffic violation fees 100%, raising fees to register a mortgage, and on. Very substantial. We don't need another tax. Call it whatever you want, traffic pricing, it's another tax. And that's what my opponent will continue to propose, as Mangano did, propose traffic violation fees that went up 100% that were allowed by the legislature. We need new concepts in transportation. We need to make transportation, both the Long Island Railroad, our bus systems, and new concepts such as public ride-share services, attractive so that people can get to work, can get into the city, have a comfortable sit in the morning, and get into the city in 30 minutes. And not only would that remove a lot of cars, people are driving because they don't like the railroad. They cannot get on time, to work on time. So if we have a reliable public transportation system, not only will we remove traffic from the street, from our roads, but also create an economic boom because companies will want to flock here.
Thank you. The natural outgrowth of this is population growth and density, and Nassau County has a lot of villages, a lot of various levels of government here. How would you, as county executive, work with the villages as well as the unincorporated areas to encourage them to take some of these more forward-looking approaches to handling these issues? Mr. Marius?
It's me?
Yep,
Okay.
it's you.
Well, this is where leadership comes in, and experience and leadership and being able to bring people together to achieve common goals. And certainly congestion is a common goal. High property taxes is a common goal that we all face. Affordable housing, is a common goal that we have. And creating a vibrant economy for the future is a common goal. And we need to come together. And all my life I've proven that I have leadership skills. I've succeeded in managing large organizations, and being promoted because of the successful results that I was able to achieve. I'm the only person, the only candidate here that brings a professional background of achievement and experience. My opponent has none.
Thank you. Ms. Curran?
So let's talk about experience. My opponent, two-time running mate of Ed Mangano on the Republican ticket, ran against Senator Gillibrand as a Tea Party conservative, against choice, anti-gay marriage, climate change denying. He ran on repealing Obamacare. So I believe I've got the experience that matters, and yes, I would love to talk about experience. To the question at hand. So
Thank you. Excuse me.
yeah.
Just wait a minute, please. I'm sorry to interrupt your
That's okay.
train of thought. If you can't control yourself, please leave the room. This is a courtesy to everyone in the room. We know you're passionate. It's wonderful. We're going to have a great turnout for the election on Tuesday. But please don't interrupt a response, whether you like it or don't. So, Tamara, could you just back up and would you start your answer again?
Yes.
Not the prologue, but the
Got
one
it.
answering the
Yes.
question.
So it's an excellent question. We have a crazy patchwork quilt of municipalities, 71 plus villages with mayors, 3 huge towns. They're not really towns, they're more like mini counties, 2 cities, and there's not a lot of cohesion. We're a community of communities. People like it that they come here for the communities, but it does make it very difficult to get things done. And I'll just give you an example. So where I live in Baldwin, the town of Hempstead, which controls the zoning, is doing a mixed-use development. At the same time, the county, it's on a county road, is working on a traffic calming project to create a little downtown. Now, that was a coincidence. It should not be a coincidence. It could be a holistic thing that we do together. It requires a lot of diplomacy. It requires working across party lines. It requires working across municipal lines. So that's something I think I bring to the table. I look forward to doing this. And I think actually George has a point. It does benefit all of our constituents. And not for nothing, it benefits all of our bottom lines on the government level as well.
Thank you. Ms. Curran, a follow-up to that. There's a question. Downtown revitalization for minority communities is not being seen. An example given is Roosevelt. What are you planning to do to fix the downtown and bring in new businesses in minority areas?
Great question. So villages, I find, sometimes have an easier time doing downtown revitalization and transit-oriented development around their train stations. I talked about Patchogue, I talked about Farmingdale, there's here Rockville Center. Those are villages that have mayors who are forward-thinking. So a place like Baldwin or Roosevelt is unincorporated, so they're not really, masters of their domain in a way that a village is. So we have to make sure that, number one, we elect people to the village boards, to the town boards, who really take their community's interests at heart, and also to create a vision of how we make it happen. I think people being involved is key, and I do believe that downtown revitalization is what will save us as a region. I'm concerned that our tax base will continue to erode if we do not enliven and generate our downtowns, make them transit-oriented, make people want to live there, wide range of housing options. And I find that NIMBYism is dying down now. People want that now. Residents want that now. And I think you'll get more buy-in from people in government when it comes from the grassroots.
Thank you. Mr. Margus, same question.
We're not creating affordable housing. We don't have policies that help our neediest communities, our poor communities. And even in this, transit-oriented housing that we're talking about, that we're proud of, we're allowing developers, to come in and get very generous tax abatements and zone variants and have no requirements that they give something back to the community in terms of affordable housing. And Mineola is a good example. We built housing development where studios start at $2,500. Who can afford that? We have gentrification happening in our minority communities. The county has had an aspirational goal to put aside 16% of spend towards minority and women-owned businesses. And we paid lip service to it. And nobody other than myself as controller advocated that we invest more in our minority businesses and women-owned businesses as a method to stimulate economic development in those communities.
Thank you. Can you give one specific example of what you, each of you, as county executive, would actually be able to do for a minority community that's in need? Pick your area. What's something that you don't need to get everybody on board for that can be done? Or is the county exec really powerless and has to build coalitions?
No, the county executive has a lot of power to effect very rapidly bring about affordable housing in communities. As I said, through our minority and women-owned empowerment, we can immediately invest a lot of money to help those struggling businesses stimulate businesses in minority communities. We have, as my opponents, And a good example is the iStar down in Long Beach that she supports. That is an example of the abuse, and the corporate welfare that we have in Nassau County that sanctions out of the economy a lot of money and does not allow for us to develop affordable housing, invest in our public transportation system, or lower property taxes by having a fair and equitable property tax assessment system for our middle class and our seniors, and certainly our lower income families.
Thank you. Ms. Kern?
Something that the county executive can concretely do is take a look at the IDA. The county executive appoints the members of, it's the Industrial Development Agency. It's a quasi-governmental entity. And the IDA is meant to create jobs and do true economic development. Unfortunately, that's not happening right now under this administration. So we're seeing tax breaks given to, for example, storage facilities that hire maybe 2 people. That's not job creation. That's not real economic development. We've got to make our IDA muscular and do really good deals, because what these IDAs do is they make deals. They basically have taxpayers subsidize economic development as an investment that the economic development down the road will pay back and will actually create more revenue. Right now, we've got a problem where deals are done, but then there's no mechanism if the developer or the business does not meet its part of the deal. There's not really much of a mechanism to bring that money back and give it to the taxpayer. We've got to make the IDA more transparent, have the meetings public, and really have it be used for what it was meant to be.
Thank you.
And just to answer the question, that will do the right kind of
Thank you.
development in the neighborhoods that need it.
Yeah, red card?
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Theory is great, but again, my opponent, supports the giveaway to the iStar development, $100 million of taxpayer money to go to the iStar development that is supposed by the community, by the way, as a giveaway, corporate welfare, without asking for anything in return in terms of affordable housing for the community. That is wrong. So theory is great, what you're going to do. But when the issue is on the table, she has done nothing and spoken not a word against it.
Thank you. Okay.
I'll just
Red
add,
card, okay.
total fabrication, I actually don't even know, anyway, total fabrication from someone, but I think that's someone that we expect who's running as a Democrat, someone who ran as an apologist for this current administration twice, as a team member of this administration, just making things up out of whole cloth.
And at this point, we can all use a drink of water. And I want to give the audience a chance to submit a few more questions.
Okay.
We have plenty still, so we'll take about a 2-minute break. Please don't leave the room,
Thank
but
you.
yes, you can do that. Could everybody please find a seat, or step out, finish your conversation, and just slip back in?
That's great.
All right, we'll do something a little different just to get
Okay.
started here. And Ms. Curran, you'll go first. Tell us one nice thing about your opponent. And I'm going to ask you the same, Mr. Marigas.
Okay, of course. Okay.
So my opponent, who came to this country as an immigrant, started a successful business. I admire that. That's what this country is about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's okay. This is feel-good time, then we'll get to the meat and potatoes. Mr. Marigas.
And I must say my opponent is a wonderful person who cares deeply about her people and her community, and I respect that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll bring in some current events here. Mr. Marigas, why don't you go first on this?
Okay.
The softball came first. What's your reaction to the news on DACA? And if you're a county executive today, how would you respond?
Well, I've already responded that it's a heartless decision. it's cruel to deny young people hope that they were given. I also spoke out against Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement policy, the only person to do so, and asked both the legislature and the administration to enact a welcoming and friendly immigration policy, highlighting the weaknesses that we have in the system, that we have ICE in our jail that is permitted to exist, that each of the law enforcement agencies have dissimilar immigration enforcement policies, that, as I highlighted as controller, can deny people due process, which is a fundamental right in our Constitution. And that should not be happening here in Nassau County. And I highlighted it can happen. It is happening. People are being detained on administrative warrants without cause,
Thank you.
denying people due process rights.
Thank you. Ms. Kern?
So the rhetoric coming from the Trump administration and also the policy coming out of the Trump administration is something that as county executive, I will make sure that we protect people who are here. When it comes specifically to DACA, you're totally disenfranchising 800,000 young people, many of whom live on Long Island, people who are working, who are paying taxes, who are serving in the military. You're not only disrupting their lives, disrupting their families, and spreading fear, it also has a real economic consequence. So there was an estimate I just read today that $280 billion will be lost in the next decade if these young people can't continue to work and have a good, productive life here. So we've got to make sure that we take a very strong stand here and say that is unacceptable. It's the wrong thing to do for human reasons. It's also the wrong thing to do for our economy.
And to follow up on that, since the way it's been left by the president is Congress should find a solution in 6 months, if you're a county executive, you'll be in office while they still have 3 months to work on it.
Right.
How would you go about getting that message across to the congressional delegation?
We've got to lobby our local Congress people really hard what the consequences of this will be. We've got to make it very clear that this is not acceptable. It's going to hurt our families. It's going to hurt our communities. It will make our communities less safe. And it's also going to hurt our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Margus?
I would do similar. I think it's a federal issue. I think we have to be strong advocates that, certainly the Democratic caucus in Washington continues to speak loudly, in support of extending DACA as long as possible. I didn't understand why the president had to repeal it. Why couldn't he wait and give the Congress 6 months and then act? He didn't have to act. That's perplexing to me. It's convoluted logic. But yes, we need to, as a community, speak loud against the terminating DACA, and certainly moving to have a path for citizenship for these innocent people that are an asset to our communities.
Thank you. And again to you first. There are always questions about making a county, in this case Nassau, a sanctuary county. And we've heard the current Justice Department speak loud and clear about how they intend to have financial damage put out on communities, cities, counties that do not permit ICE in and comply with all the regulations. Could you address that if you were county executive?
Well, without calling it exactly that, that's exactly what I proposed when I brought the leading activists on Long Island, immigration activists, together to discuss the findings that we had with regards to the unequal policies among us law enforcement, and to recommend that I should not be housed in our correctional facility, that we should not honor administrative warrants without cause, that they should be subjected to a judicial review. And that is exactly what New York City has done, exactly the same policies, but they put the label on it, sanctuary. And when I had a debate with my Republican opponent that my Democratic opponent did not attend, he wanted basically for us to have a police state where immigration officers and our police officers would be sent into churches to arrest and apprehend
Thank
people without cause and without a judicial
Thank you.
warrant.
Okay,
Do you want me to answer that one too?
yes.
Okay. So Nassau County Police Department has a policy, and that policy is that if you're the victim of a crime, if you have information about a crime, if you're the witness of a crime, the police do not want to know about your immigration status. And that is a very important policy, and one as county executive, I will make sure is strengthened and that every officer out there knows is our policy. And it's so important because it builds trust. It helps to continue to build the trust between communities and the police who protect them. If someone who's a victim of domestic violence or someone who has information about a gang is afraid to come forward, those problems will continue to get worse. However, if you're a violent criminal, all bets are off. There's no place for you in our society.
Thank you. Ms. Curran,
Yes.
you want to use your red card? This is the
Yes.
last one for
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
My opponent does not recognize, even though I highlighted that our police department, like our corrections officers, can apprehend people on an administrative warrant from ICE and detain them without cause. And the fact that the county controller, I highlighted this 6 months ago, and called on the legislature and the county executive to demand a uniform policy, to demand a friendly and welcoming immigration policy, that we should not be honoring administrative warrants without judicial review. She has not spoken up, and that still persists today.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Ms. Curran,
Yes.
how will you address incidents of police brutality in Nassau County?
Something that I have actually proposed, I think, is something that we can explore and something that I would negotiate with the police union in the next contract is the use of body cameras and dashboard cameras. In a village that I represent, I represent a big part of the village of Freeport. It's the first, and I believe it's still the only police department in the state that has body cameras, and it's something that works. And this is something that I would be very interested in. In fact, this current administration had agreed to do a pilot program to explore body cameras. It hasn't done. As county executive, I will negotiate it. I will get that pilot program started, and because I think that will be a very important way to restore trust between police and the people that they protect.
Thank you. Mr. Marigas?
Body cams are obviously very important, but so is following up on allegations of police brutality, and we're not doing any of that. And the county executive has not demanded, because the county executive is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. And there's been a number of instances of police brutality, and our county executive and the legislature did not speak up and demand an investigation, as they had a right to do so.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marigas, what is your position on the establishment of a police review board in Nassau County?
I'm all in favor of more transparent government. And I must say, as controller, I've been recognized nationally for having an office that has been the most transparent, has been leaders in the nation in putting our contracts online, all our checkbook online, and we've continued now to continue to put even more information online so that we have a complete transparency in government. We're the only ones that respond to FOIL requests, usually within 5 days.
Thank you. Ms. Kern?
I think anything that we can do to really build the trust between police and the communities is something we should take a serious look at.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Curran, how will you improve conditions at the Nassau County Jail?
So the jail under this administration has suffered real mismanagement. I don't believe that the sheriff's job is a job for a patronage position. I believe it's a job, as we have in this current administration, it's a job for a true professional who understands corrections, who is there managing. We have a situation where the infrastructure is crumbling, and It's not safe for the people who work there. It's not safe for the people who are housed there. We had a terrible situation with Armour. The county, under this administration, gave a contract to a private healthcare provider to do healthcare at the jail. This contractor was not meeting the requirements of its contract. Every few months, they were supposed to do regular reporting of the metrics, of the statistics. They were not doing this. I asked, actually, I wanted to know when we were seeing inmates dying, et cetera, I asked for these reports. And all of a sudden, they threw something together. It was self-contradictory. You could tell it was just done at the last minute. And my opponent, at that point, decided that was the time to stop paying Armour, when this had been going on for, $60 million 5 years later. He finally decided to take that stand.
Thank you. Mr. Marigus?
Well, the first thing I would do as county executive is fire the sheriff, who's a chef. His background is a chef, if you believe. We have a sheriff, the head of the jail, in charge of close to $100 million that we spend annually with no relevant experience. That's the first thing that I would do, and put a professional in there to manage the jail. Secondly, the facility, as my opponent indicated, is crumbling. The elevators don't work. Can you imagine the sheriff telling you that we don't need a camera surveillance system that hasn't been maintained for close to 20 years? And his argument was, it's an excuse that we don't need to have it. Can you imagine in a jail without a camera surveillance system? And again, my opponent and the legislature, nobody raised a sound about the management of the jail or the mismanagement. And I want to point out to my opponent that myself as controller moved on the jail well below the state attorney general did back in 2013. So what she's alleging is patently incorrect.
Mr. Marigus, both you and your opponent have talked about corruption in the county. You've mentioned the sheriff and the head of the jail in terms of answers to that question. Could you point to other areas of corruption that, as county executive, you want to work on those?
Well, absolutely, and my opponent was kind of implicated in that regard in voting to authorize $50 million, voting with the Republicans to authorize $50 million in wasteful spending, a self-serving vote that is costing the taxpayers $50 million. That is corruption at the core.
Ms. Carr?
Just to correct the record, I did publicly call for the sheriff to resign several months ago. When we talk about corruption, this is the topic that is at the top of everybody's minds. As I said in my opening, there is a real lack of trust in government. There's a real lack of trust in the status quo. When I'm county executive, I'm going to put safeguards in place to get rid of patronage jobs, to make sure that bloated contracts aren't given out, that every penny is being spent appropriately. Everyone I appoint will not be allowed to contribute to my campaign or be the member of the leader of a political party. My opponent, talk about patronage, hired his own sister-in-law for a $90,000 a year job. That is the status quo. That is exactly what people are sick of. We got to get rid of the corruption tax.
Okay, thank you.
Because guess who pays for it? You do.
Thank you. Ms. Curran, if a hurricane the likes of Harvey or Irma hit Nassau County, what would you do?
We've got to start planning right now before it happens. So one thing that I've proposed that this county doesn't have currently is a master resiliency plan to make sure that we shore up our infrastructure, that we have the escape routes all set, that everything is ready for when the storm hits. We've got to do everything we can in a very holistic way for the whole county. Right now you have it happening here and there in some villages, but we've got to make sure that we have a master plan that covers the entire county. Speaking about Trump earlier, Donald Trump said he repealed an Obama rule, and this rule said that any infrastructure projects that use taxpayer money, he's saying now no longer have to take into account climate change, as the Obama rule said, have to take into account climate change, flooding, storm surge, etc. As county executive, I pledge that any money, taxpayer money used to fund infrastructure has to be built to withstand the ravages of climate change. That was exactly the wrong thing to do. Also, Donald Trump said the United States is getting out of the Paris Climate Accord. And that was very disappointing. I was encouraged by the mayors and governors who said
Thank
they will
you.
stick with the Accords. As county executive, Nassau County will stick with the climate accords.
Thank you. Mr. Marigus?
Yes, my opponent spoke about not taking political contributions. You know, initially she said she was going to limit it to 500, then she raised it to 1,000, and now I think last week she raised it to 5,000, while at the same time taking 25,000 from our Republicans, big Republican donors that have corrupted Mangano, such as RXR, Gambrielli, and many others. So, you know, we say one thing if there's not, and do something else. Is that what we want in the next county executive? That is corruption and at the core again. And the next county executive should not be caught with those lies, saying one thing and doing something else to further her aspirations.
Yes.
My opponent had no problem taking money from these people when he ran twice as Ed Mangano's running mate on the Republican ticket.
No, I didn't take money.
And he also was given $150,000 from the Republican Party in his last race to run his race. I have to admit, I am very proud of the support that I've gotten. I believe it's because my message is resonating. It's resonating in all of our communities. It's a message that we can do better, that the status quo is not working, and that people are fed up. And I think the support and the wide range of support that I've gotten shows that I am the right messenger and I've got the right message. And I'm also very proud to say that I've got the support of Planned Parenthood. I'm endorsed by Governor Cuomo, by Congresswoman Rice, Congressman Tom Suozzi, and Senator Gillibrand. And I think that wide range of supports from the grassroots on up shows that I'm the right person to take on the Republicans in
Thank you.
November.
And at this point, you've both used all 3 of your rebuttal cards.
Got it.
So take notes. You have your 2-minute close, and make sure you cover the points that
Right.
you really wanted to have another red card for. Mr. Marigus, I want to go back to Long Island and particularly Nassau County and water. If elected, how would you assure Nassau County's aquifer system and drinking water is properly managed and vigilantly protected?
Again, unlike my opponent, the legislature and the county executive, I, as controller about a year ago, brought together the leading environmentalists in a controllers advisory committee to look at the issues of how we can better protect our water, our waterways, and our environment. What we need to do as a government, because nothing was being done. Nothing was being done. No reports were being issued to the public as to how frequently we were testing our water. But once in a while, we were hearing that, you know, there were contaminants in the water. We were surprised to find that the carcinogen 1.4 dioxin was found in the water, and nobody, including my opponent, raised an issue. Where this controller did, and we demanded, we wrote to the health department through this advisory committee that I appointed to make sure to understand what testing, to encourage more testing, to demand, to ask the administration and the legislature to request more state funding, which we got very little of, by the way, because nobody
Thank you.
asked.
Okay, thank you very much.
There are 2 ways. So 2 ways to protect our aquifer. We, on Long Island, we have single source aquifer. We get our water from one place, and that's under the ground. 2 things I'm very concerned about. Number 1 is we have so many people minding the store. We've got municipal water districts. We've got water districts that are independently, have independently elected commissioners. We've got private companies doing it in some places. The price of water costs, so much more or less depending on where you have. There's no one minding the store overall. We've got to make sure that we have an entity looking over all of these smaller entities to make sure that they're doing the job right. Number 2, we have a situation in the city, just a little bit to the west of here. The city is looking to reopen some wells, a couple dozen wells in South Queens. Now, these wells will draw water out of our aquifer and into the city. The city has many places to get water. We've got one. We've got to make sure that the city does not get access to our water, because if they draw the water out of our aquifer, we can have a problem of salt water intruding into the aquifer, which will make our water undrinkable. The other problem is the Northrop Grumman plume can spread from the vacuum of the water coming out, and that's something that we have to be very careful about. I'm very
Thank you.
happy that our local
Thank you.
Congress people, okay,
Okay,
I'll get it at the next one.
yeah. And along the same line, if elected, and Ms. Curran, you go on this, will you assure the residents of Long Beach, Barrier Island, that the county's plan to discharge 100 to 150 million gallons of effluent from Cedar Creek sewage treatment plant to the Atlantic Ocean will not ruin their beaches?
This is a serious problem with the Cedar Creek. So Cedar Creek actually has an outfall pipe that takes the water way out, a couple of miles out into the ocean. The problem right now is with the Bay Park sewage treatment plant, which does not have such an outfall pipe. So the county has been trying to get money from the state and federal government to invest in an outfall pipe. It costs a lot of money. Money's not coming. There's an interesting plan right now to bring that water up, and you're going to have to work with the localities to have this, to bring the sewage, the treated sewage up from Bay Park to an old viaduct that looks like it's still viable. Actually, it's an aqueduct that runs under Sunrise Highway. Bring that water, that treated sewage, to the Cedar Creek and then to the outfall pipe. For that to work, we've got to make sure that we speak with the communities, that we educate them on how it's going to work to get their buy-in, but that could be a solution to the problem. The problem with nitrogen going into the bays is that it kills the marshlands, which act as a natural buffer against storm. Also, it kills the sea fish, the seafood, it hurts the recreation industry down there, and it hurts our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Marigas?
You know, it's interesting, you know, that my opponent has imaginary solutions and is an expert in all sciences. You know, I believe in bringing together the best experts in the field to consult and to come up with plans, you know, that would be effective in protecting our water, protecting our waterways, you know, and protecting our environment through green procurement policies. That is, you know, what experience in management is all about. I don't pretend to know everything in every science. So it's important to understand your limitations and also when to reach out. In terms of the outflow pipe, you know, again, we need to ensure that our waterways are protected, that the nitrogen level in our water, you know, is controlled, that we use the best sciences available, and so it's important, and that's why, you know, I brought this environmental committee so that we can play, you know, an educated and informed role in ensuring that outflow pipe is built correctly. And as well bring the community in, because this, you know, this intermediate pipe between Cedar Creek and our other waste management plan is against, the community doesn't want it because there's substantial risks. Thank you.
Mr. Marigas, on another subject, many people are leaving Nassau County due to high taxes and lack of economic opportunity. What is your vision for bringing jobs and opportunity to Nassau County?
Well, the vision, and we've articulated, we studied the demographics in a report that I issued back in 2013-14 that says, you know, our population is aging, our young people are going away to college and not coming back because we're not creating those high-paying, exciting opportunities right here in Nassau County. So I articulated, I presented a vision that we invest in creating an economy built around healthcare, wellness, biotech, biosciences, and become best in the world. That Nassau County should be where people will want to come to get the best treatments possible, and where the next generation of miracle drugs and treatments will be found, and create an ecosystem that will be sustaining, growing, and creating those high-paying, exciting opportunities for our young people in order to keep them here and have our young people that go away come back.
Thank you. Ms. Curran?
To keep people here, we've got to maximize our potential. We've got to develop the hub in a smart way. We've got to do good transit-oriented development where it makes sense. We need to invest in robust public transportation for people to get around. And we also need to create a vision of how we do it. We've got to work across municipal lines. We've already talked about this. The reason why this is so key, and the reason why I'm so passionate about a wide range of housing options, is that employers looking to relocate, businesses looking for a place to set up, are looking for a place where their employees can afford to live and also have a good quality of life. We're falling short of that right now, and I know we can do better. We've got great potential here. We've got good schools, we've got smart people, we're right near New York City, but let's live up to our potential. Let's get it together and live up to our potential.
Thank you. Ms. Curran, I have 5 cards about affordable housing in addition to the ones we've already covered. And everybody right now, and this is for both of you, really wants to know more about specifics, because when you look at the housing stock in the county,
Yeah.
there isn't a lot of open space where you can create new developments that include workforce or affordable housing. So they all want to know, how are we going to do this? You know, nobody wants to wait 40 years to
That's
see
right.
another generation. So could you each address that?
You know, we
first.
talk about young people, it's also older people who are looking to downsize. I have a couple across the street, they're grandparents now. They are having a very hard time to find a condo or a place to live that's affordable. So, what do we do, again, about affordable housing? We've got to create the atmosphere. We've got to work with our IDAs in a smart way to do real affordable housing. There are lots of mechanisms now to fund affordable housing through tax credits, et cetera. We can do a much better job at the county level of making that happen. Concretely, we've got to make sure that we keep our young people here, because if we don't, we will continue to wither, and that's something that I'm concerned about. We've got to be very serious and make sure that we work with the zoning municipalities, with the towns and villages, copy what works, and have a mechanism that you have a certain amount of affordable housing. There is supposed to be a certain amount of affordable housing, but often when these things are built, there's not much that's affordable.
Thank you. Mr. Margus?
The best way to create rapidly affordable housing is to stop granting tax abatements through the IDAs to developers. Stop giving them generous zoning variances, and that without any requirement that they put aside, like New York City, 25% or 27% of all units built to be affordable to the average family income in the immediate community. That will immediately stimulate more affordable housing. Secondly, we need to address the issue that is perplexing, that, you know, which is that we have close to 80 zoning jurisdictions in Nassau County. Nobody wants development. And it takes an average of 2 years, to build anything in Nassau County. We need a master plan. We need to consolidate our zoning boards into a few. But, you know, we need a master zoning plan like New York City does that would facilitate, expedite development, and increase the supply, and that will create even more affordable housing.
Thank you. We have time just for a few more questions before you get your wrap-up. So the next question is, what policy change would be your top priority if elected?
Is that me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My top policy choice, which I've already enunciated many times, is to fix the broken property tax assessment system. And they call it broken. It's been broken for 70 years. It's not broken. It's rigged. It's fixed. It has shifted the property tax burden from the high-end homes in a pay-to-play culture, those people that use politically connected attorneys that make significant political contributions, of which some my opponent has taken from those very tax cert attorneys, and shift the tax burden to the middle income and the lower income families. I wrote an audit, I presented an audit back in 2011, that the reforms that were being enacted would cause this huge shift in the property tax burden from the upper end homes to the middle income home. 60% of our residents are paying anywhere from 15 to 30% more in property tax than they should because of the rigged property tax assessment system. On day one, I will reverse that.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Ms. Kern.
Thank you, yes. We've got to restore trust in government on day one. There are so many things that we can do, real concrete things that we can do to get rid of the patronage, to get rid of the bloated contracts, and to finally get rid of the corruption tax that we all pay to fund this dysfunctional system. Speaking about assessment, for some reason, this administration has not been bothered to hire an actual credentialed qualified assessor. Meanwhile, the assessment department has been cut literally in half, so you don't have the people doing the work. And at the same time, assessments have been frozen for 7 years. So you have a situation where most people are grieving, and most of those who grieve their assessment get a reduction. And then you have the reality where the tax burden has become completely not only inaccurate, but also unfair. Got to hire an actual credentialed assessor, make sure that we properly staff the assessment department, get the assessment right, do them at least every 3 to 5 years, at least, so that we get them right, everybody pays their fair share, and we will save money because we have to borrow money to pay those back every single year.
Ms. Curran, what values do you hold that would make you the best representative of the Democratic Party in Nassau County?
I believe that as a lifelong Democrat, my values align very closely with the Democratic Party. Pro-choice, pro-marriage equality, climate change is real, and my opponent ran as a Tea Party conservative against Senator Gillibrand, denying climate change, anti-choice, anti-gay marriage, an extreme platform that most people in this country don't agree with. I'm very proud that I've got the endorsement of Planned Parenthood for my commitment to choice and for women's health. I also agree that everyone who lives in our county, our wonderful county, deserves to grow up, all children deserve to grow up to be confident and self-reliant, no matter what zip code they were born in, no matter what school district they're in. And as county executive, I will work as hard as I can to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Mr. Marigas?
I think the most important value in the next county executive is integrity and experience, of which my opponent has already proven in corrupting money from the same Republican donors that corrupted Mangano. She has already taken $25,000 and probably more. She has probably struck a backroom deal with the Republicans to authorize breaking out away from her party, the Democratic Party, and voting to approve $50 million of wasteful spending. If that is, not corrupting, I don't know what it is. So, if we cannot restore trust in government, if we are not living up to our integrity, if we are misleading people, telling them that, we're going to limit our contributions to $500 and turning around the next day and accepting $25,000 from people that have vested interests in the pay-to-play culture. So integrity and experience are crucial in the next county executive.
And the last question from me, from the audience, is how would you be independent of the Democratic system, the Democratic machine? Because Nassau County has, on all party levels, had a lot of machine politics. So, Mr. Marigas, you first on that.
Well, I've already proven my independence. Certainly, I have not been handpicked. I have not been given $36,000 that the party boss has given my opponent. And of course, those are investments. Those are investments that these corrupting influence are making, and they want something in return, and they want a return on that investment. And I think that's what they're going to have if my opponent is elected as the next the Democratic nominee to represent the Democratic Party. That's not the start that we need to bring trust in government. That is not what it's going to take to win against a strong Republican machine. If we cannot present a candidate that has integrity and experience, that at the same has been already corrupted, then there will be no differentiation, with the Republican nominee and the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party will not win the next general election for county executive.
Ms. Curran?
So I want to be very clear. When I announced my candidacy for county executive in my living room last November, I did not ask for anyone's permission. I got into this race because I've had a front row seat to what is not working, and the status quo is not working. That's what's inspired my run. I had the potential of being the outsider candidate because, frankly, I have ruffled feathers in my party, and I have made people angry at me for things that I've done. But every single vote that I've taken, and yes, sometimes I have reached across the aisle when I thought it was the right thing to do for my constituents, and I'm very proud of that. I would do it again. My opponent had no problem taking money from these same guys he's talking about now when he was Ed Mangano's two-time running mate. Thank you.
Okay. You each have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Ms. Curran, you'll go first. Mr. Marigas, second. Voters make their choice because they want to vote for someone. We've all seen cases throughout our lives of people voting against, but not really formulating what they want to see. So what I would do is encourage you both to speak about why people should vote for you, incorporate your vision, and make it as positive as you can so people will go in and look at your name in the polling place and say, yes, that's the one I want to vote for. So, Ms. Curran, 2 minutes for you, please.
So having been a newspaper reporter in my past life, I'm not the status quo. I bring a message of positivity and of what we can achieve, of what we can do. And I believe that my candidacy is gaining momentum, gaining endorsements, and gaining support because I'm the right messenger and I've got the right message. I love traveling around this county. I love talking to people about their concerns. I actually love campaigning. I love debates like this because I know that we can do so much better. I'm very proud to have been endorsed by Planned Parenthood, by Congresswoman Rice, by Congressman Tom Suozzi, Kirsten Gillibrand, and just this week by Governor Cuomo. Because that to me validates that I am the right candidate and that I will be the strong one to win and take back our county in November, that we can finally live up to our potential and finally live up to the greatness of the people who live here. Because right now, under this current administration, it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment that we're under a knife of control, and it's an embarrassment that we're losing our young people.
Okay. Mr. Marigus, you have 2 minutes for your close.
The status quo is not working. My opponent represents the continuation of the status quo, the corruption that we have, the inability to have a vision that would create a new economy and fix our infrastructure. On the other hand, I'm beholden to nobody but the people, you know, all of you in this room. Okay? I've taken no contributions. I'm self-funding my campaign. That's how I committed to this cause, to bring about change, in Nassau County.
Hold that thought for a minute. We're taking that off his time. Don't interrupt the candidate you're supporting. We're almost done.
So if we want change, if we want a clean break with the past, to build a new Nassau County that's going to be affordable, that's going to be vibrant, that's going to provide exciting job opportunities, affordable housing, fair taxation, that we have. Our seniors cannot afford to stay here. Our young people cannot afford to stay here. And not to start conceptualizing a vision. I've articulated a vision that has been tested with various experts. I know how to bring people together, and that's about, what government should be. Government should be about giving hope to people that have not had hope, that have been robbed of hope because of the institutions and the special interests, and the two-party system that we have here. Our communities have grown. Our minority communities represent nearly 40% of our population, and they've been neglected by both parties. I've been criticized for going to those. We need to empower all our people, treat our people fairly, equitably, and empower them, and have a government that serves the people that have the greatest need, not the people that have the least need, that pay to get contracts, and in the pay-to-play culture that we have. And as an independent outsider, not beholden to the system, not taking political contributions, I will work solely for the people and all of you in this room. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf, now make sure you get people out to vote.
Thank you.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank the candidates, of course, Molloy College for their tremendous help, and again, they live stream this event. And again, all of you for your thoughtful questions. Apologies if yours was not asked. As you saw, I was juggling about 50 or 60 cards. So again, thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming.